Enough for me, sorry.
We don't get a cheer?
I mean, you'll definitely get a smile. I just, yeah, that's as far as I can go at this point.
All right, Madam Chair, we're ready.
All right, well, good morning and welcome to everybody to the Committee of the Whole work session. We're here on Tuesday, May 17th. It's 10:31 and it is time to get started. The first item on our agenda is to look at our minutes. We have that from our Committee of the Whole work session from April 19th. And then we have a number of presentations. And we have a big contingency here from MnDOT. Andy, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to introduce your colleagues.
Greetings, Andy Hubley with the ARDC. I know most of you, and appreciate you letting us come up here today and talk about transportation. And particularly thank you for allowing Ginny to serve on our board and commission. We certainly love having her there. And with me is Paige Meluis. She's with the ARDC. She's new, and she is primarily working on transportation items. And I'll let Brian introduce the rest of the team.
Yeah, I'm Brian Anderson. I'm Planning Director for MnDOT out of our Duluth office. I'm joined here today with, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Peggy Mayfield. I'm the Public Engagement and Communications Coordinator.
And we also have...
I'm Holly Kostreski. I'm the Northeast Minnesota Towards Zero Death Regional Director.
And Kristen.
I'm Kristen Foster, District State Aid Engineer for Northeast Minnesota.
All right, thanks. We'll turn it over to Paige now, and she can talk about the Transportation Alternatives Program and things going on.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to provide you guys today with an update on our Transportation Alternatives Program for fiscal year 2026. The task force met on February 17th in 2022 to review applicant projects for the TA program in Northeast Minnesota. $900,000 in funds available for distribution under this program, and the task force recommends the Northeast Minnesota Area Transportation Partnership, ATP, to program the following projects listed in the listed funding amounts for fiscal year 2026. So the first is the Campus Connector Segment 5 that was awarded to the City of Duluth. That dollar amount is $384,091, as well as the Multimodal Trail Center to the City of Silver Bay for $515,909. ARDC also contracts with MnDOT for transportation planning, So for fiscal year 2023, the following work plan has been approved. These are the projects that we'll be working on under this work plan. So the community transportation plans for the city of Cloquet, Aitkin, and Fond du Lac Reservation. We'll be continuing to work on regional scenic byway development, including the Skyline Parkway Corridor Management Plan, Edge of the Wilderness Corridor Management Plan, North Shore Scenic Drive, council projects, Mille Lacs Scenic Byway General Assistance, Superior National Forest Byway, that's the Silver Bay Trailhead, Avenue of Pines Trail and Trailhead. We'll also assist with paved trail development, including the Gitchigami Trail Association, Ely Multimodal Trailhead, the Mosavi Trail, as well as the Nashwauk Multimodal Trailhead, and then other activities as identified. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
So Cook County did apply for a Transportation Alternatives Grant this year. It was not awarded funding, and we'll be in communication with the Highway Department to discuss how to make that application a little bit better and give it a better shot of getting funded.
Thank you.
Can you talk about the Mosavi Trail a little bit? Just, I'm from Grand Rapids, and so I have a little bit of experience with it, but not on the Ely side. And it goes from Grand Rapids to Ely, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. Andy, do you want to?
Yeah, so the segments that are being constructed now are on the Ely end of things, and the city of Ely is seeking to develop a trailhead building right when you come into town on the west end, and that would serve snowmobile trail, the Mosavi Trail, and an ATV trail system. And the way it's drawn up now, it would be a pretty significant building, but also serve as a welcome center. So it's kind of a neat project. We like the projects that create efficiencies, and rather having each trail have its own trailhead, if we can do it all at once, it really is a good thing.
Yeah, in our Parks and Trails Commission, we've talked about kind of a central trailhead for numerous recreational opportunities in the Saki Bluffs area. And it's still pretty early stages. We've got a master plan, but not a whole lot of details. And but it's a similar mentality of having that centralized, trying to keep everything together and maybe help manage it instead of having many different structures to maintain and facilitate. So it's exciting to hear about.
Yeah, that sounds great. What's the timeline look like for that?
We're currently, it's between the city of Grand Marais and Cook County. And so we're currently working out the joint powers agreement for that. There is one user group so far that's got the go-ahead, and that's a dog park. It's kind of at the bottom of the hill. Beyond that, it's pretty nebulous.
Sure.
We also were looking for legacy funding. I guess it was deemed a significant, worth pursuing. So we still have to go through that process once we have the joint powers agreement in place. So.
That's great to know. I'm sure there'll be plenty of lessons learned here that we can apply in the future.
Yeah, that's what caught my ear, and I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
check in with you guys and lean on that a little bit.
That'd be perfect.
There are some, interesting funding sources out there now with the IRRB's trail funding program. And the Ely Trailhead actually got it's not official. Looks like they're going to get $1.5 million from the Federal Economic Development Administration, which just since COVID hit has decided that they can fund tourism projects in addition to industrial projects.
Interesting. Well, that's, my ears are, you really caught me.
I'll be sure to give you my card and we can go from there.
Great.
I'm fairly familiar with the project at Saltiff Bluffs,
Great.
All right.
since I actually wrote it. It seems like forever ago now. But
Yeah.
It does.
yeah.
It's a long process.
Yeah. Well, glad to see that at least progress is being sought. Glad to see it.
Okay, I'll take over for the MnDOT perspective anyways. Going to talk a little bit about our Northeast Minnesota Area Transportation Partnership. I did send out a handout. It should be in your board packets anyways. I'm just going to walk through that handout and then talk about some of our projects coming up in our program over the next 4 years. And I wanted just to start off by talking a little bit about our ATP, Area Transportation Partnership. And that is a group that gets together quarterly to discuss transportation. It's a forum on transportation in our area. And this board oversees about $10 million worth of federal funding for local projects. So it's really important to input from MnDOT as well, because this group provides a lot of insight into what our projects should look like and where they should be located over the program years. And so the first page there is just some statistics of our district and so forth. We do serve all on 8 counties of Northeast Minnesota, including Cook there. The second page of the handout is just a brief overview of our membership and who sits on this board. We do have a lot of multimodal representatives. We have elected officials. Our elected official from Cook County is Commissioner Svalson, and we also have the county engineers from each county. So Robert Haas is on the board as well. The third page to kind of discuss our state transportation investment plan. And this plan is our 4-year plan. So once we get a project in that 4-year plan, in that STIP, it's more or less MnDOT's commitment to the public that we are going to deliver that project. We do also have a longer range planning process as well that goes out about 10 years. Those projects from years 5 through 10, we have them in there as placeholders because we know work needs to be accomplished over the course of that time frame at some point in time, but it's more or less a planning horizon. Changing over to page 4, it's just kind of a brief overview of some of the different funding sources that come to MnDOT. Page 5 kind of walks us through our ATP process. We did have ARDC solicit for our Transportation Alternatives Program projects back in September. And then we also issued a federal aid candidate solicitation for federal aid projects in November. Over the course of January, February, and March, our ATP gets together and meets and kind of discusses those projects, and then in April we take action on which projects are funded in that program, which I'll go over here in just a minute. And then we like to come out in May and June to the county boards just to kind of present what our 4-year program is going to look like. Last page on the handout is what we have to work with for dollars. So we're adding our year 26 to our program right now. That will be our new 4th year of our program. And for MnDOT's share of funding, we have $59.4 million to work with. This is substantially lower target than we're used to. We're typically used to about $80 to $100 million for our district. There are a couple of reasons why that number is down. Over the course of years, pavement and bridge conditions deteriorate in parts of the state, so that money kind of flows around the state. At this point in time, our pavement condition compared to other places in the state is fairly good. So this will be a lower year for 2026. However, looking at our future anyways, and some of our declines in our pavement, 27 and 28 and 29, our targets will be going up quite steeply because our pavements will start to dive. So that's just a brief overview of why our targets are a little bit lower in 26. And then on the local perspective, we have about $10 million that our ATP distributes throughout for 2026. How we break that down is we have about $900,000 for the Transportation Alternatives Program, and that's our trails and trailhead facility type projects, which ARDC facilitates that process for us. We have about $1.7 million for our Highway Safety Improvement Program for the local projects. And then the remaining amount, about $3 million goes to the Duluth area under our formula, and about $4.4 million goes out to cities and counties in our area. Kristen keeps a really detailed spreadsheet in our ATP, and we rely on that spreadsheet, and we more or less transfer the funding around to each so everybody gets a turn. It's not a competitive process. Our ATP has decided that we just like to distribute the money as it comes, and each county will receive their turn. And in 2026, it is not Cook County's turn to receive dollar amount, but we typically break that $4.4 million up into three $1.48 million projects. So each county will receive $1.48 million when it is their turn. So that's a brief overview of the funding. Is there any questions so far before I dive into some of the projects coming up? All right. So I did also pass out our construction program. I'll just let you take a look at it when you get a chance. We don't have any projects scheduled in this summer in Cook County, except for some cleanups and so forth around the Grand Marais project here. But we do have 2 projects that will impact travel further down the shore in Lake County, and that is, I'm sure you've seen it, the Silver Creek Bridge and also the Stewart River Bridge. There is bypasses set up associated with those projects, so there shouldn't be too much dramatic, time differences and so forth traveling. But there may be occasional lane closures there while they work on those bridges this summer and next summer. So feel free, if there's any questions on any of the projects in our program, feel free to ask me. And then I also have a map here of all the projects in Cook County that we have coming up over the next 4 years. We do have a larger bridge rehabilitation project on the Pigeon River Bridge, and that's going to occur next in 2023. And we also do have quite a bit of culvert work in the Hubley area coming up here in 2025. Outside of that, we don't have a lot of work in Cook County in our program. We've had a lot of work over the our past programming years. So at this point in time, the pavement and bridge condition are fairly good in Cook County. I did want to mention we do like to get ahead with those culverts that we're putting in 2025, because we do plan to come back with a pavement project then in either 27 or 28. So it'll give some time for those culverts to settle, so we don't have a hump there when we pave over them. So I'm not sure if, Kristen, if you'd like to talk about the local projects at all. I'll turn it over to you, unless there's any questions on any of the state projects coming up here in our program.
Good morning, commissioners and members of today's listening audience. It was a beautiful drive, brought back good memories this morning, and I'm happy to be here. Springtime is my favorite time of year for several reasons, not the least of which is we get to visit all of you and celebrate the good work that you do for your communities at the board level, as well as through your highway department. In particular, as Brian mentioned, there are a couple of federally funded projects already coming up in the next 4 years, because you have done the work to go after those funds to support your transportation system here at the local level. You'll see the Blue Reed River Bridge replacement project coming up on North Road, and your highway department has expressed interest in additional off-system bridge funding for a few other structures as we roll out the new federal money that has come to us from DC over the course of the next year. There's a chance that we might be able to add more off-system bridge projects in the region within the next 4 years, and Robbie has already expressed interest in those, so he's great at going after the money and continuing to bring it into your system. Also, you have the Gunplant Trail project coming up. Brian mentioned how we take turns in divvying up the federal money that does come to our ATP, and Cook County received some of that money in 2024 for your Gunplant Trail project. And most recently, it's so recent in fact that we haven't put it into the 4-year plan yet, you were the recipient of the largest federal lands access program grant to expand the scope of that project to allow replacement of the Devil Track River Bridge. So hats off to the board and your administration and engineer Haas in going after those monies and bringing them back to the Cook County transportation system. Lots of exciting projects coming up. The TNR has been very active in this region as well, most recently completing the cut-face segment of the Gitchigami Trail along with some work in Tofty, and they are getting ready to start construction of the Lutsen segment either this fall or next summer, depending on how the bidding process goes. So, lots of exciting things happening for Cook County's transportation system. Are there any questions on local road and bridge opportunities?
I believe so.
Otherwise,
Exciting news, though.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass it over to my colleague Holly for a traffic safety update.
Hi, it's been a couple of years since I've been here, so I'm so happy to be back. Usually I come with a trooper, but he was called away today, so couldn't be here with us. But I represent the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Health, and the Department of Transportation in the Towards Zero Death Initiative. So it's a holistic approach to reducing death and injuries on our roadways. So I have in your packet here just, first of all, I like to tell the county boards I'm not asking for anything. I'm just here surely for information for you to share with your families and friends and colleagues and community. So we just have our Northeast Minnesota Towards Zero Death one pager, which just explains our program a little bit. And then I just wanted to go into a little bit about what's occurred on our roads in the last couple of years. So during the pandemic, we saw a decrease in our vehicle mile travel, so less people were driving, but a significant increase in deaths happened on Minnesota roads. And so we lost 501 people, which is, we haven't seen that since the early 2000s. And so how are we going to fix this problem? So it's behavior. We saw 2 to 3 times higher blood alcohol content. We also saw really high speeds, over 100 miles per hour. People chose these times when they didn't necessarily have other competitors on the highway, just apparently to see how fast their vehicles could go. And so I'm just trying to share this message of, we've got big troubles on our roads right now, so how can we each help our communities and help each other, because we're all sharing the road together, so how can we just be safer? So I have some data in here that you can just look at from a regional basis to see what was occurring on our roads, with speed. The engineers love to know if it's an intersection or runoff. My background's public health, so I want to know, why did they run off the road? Why was there an issue at the intersection? Were they on their phone? Were they not looking up? How did you hit somebody in an intersection, right? What was occurring? What was the behavior that caused that to happen? So I have the statewide information as well as the Northeast region information, which we're more concerned about here in the Arrowhead area for the 8 counties that I serve. And so speed, of course, was another issue. Impairment, our older driver population, how are we going to work and help older drivers get to their appointments, or how are we going to work through all this together? Motorcycles continue to be a problem. And so how are we going to navigate all of these new waters in Minnesota roadways? Because honestly, Minnesota's been a leader for the past 20 years in reducing deaths and injuries on our roadways. And so for us to have this huge spike, we're all very concerned as partners. How are we going to get a handle on this? Because even though we're figuring out our way through the pandemic, people's behaviors, maybe they chose to watch too much Netflix. Are they still watching too much Netflix? Or, what other choices have they made in their personal life? And maybe it occurred on the road, right? So what are they doing? Are they driving too fast? Are they distracted by everything else that's going on? So anyway, I just wanted to share information with you and some data to see if you had any questions for me, or otherwise it's just information for you to share with your community and friends. We're working closely with the parks, all of our state parks, to work on some distracted driving and that kind of thing, you know, for more tourism population. But if there's anything else that I could help with personally for Grand Marais or Cook County, I'd be happy to do so.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. Do you have any statistics or do you have an idea, a feel for Cook County in regards to our tourism will rise substantially in summer? Is there any data saying we have more accidents in summer than we do another time of the year?
Well, I don't know about Cook County exactly, but I'm glad I forgot to show that I showed your county crash map as well for 5-year trends too, so you can see. But I do know nationwide as well as Minnesota, the most crashes occur on days like today. Blue skies, clear dry roads. We usually tend to think it's during the rain or during the snow or during the ice. Not the case. People typically, on a day like today, they're thinking about, I want to go fishing, I want to go to the cabin, whatever they're thinking, not thinking about driving. So, so I don't know specifically for Cook County, but I know in general, the majority of our crashes are going to happen between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Those 100 days of summer is when we really need to be defensive drivers, and we need to remind our families, buckle up, put your cell phone down, don't call your family, don't text your family if you know they're on the road, those kind of behaviors that we can change at home and within our community.
I have a question about, on the slide about statewide crash summaries, mentioning the number of unlicensed drivers. What kinds of percentages are you seeing, and does Cook County have more accidents for unlicensed drivers than other places or not?
I don't know that, but I can look that up and get back to you. I'll get back to you on that because I don't know that specifically. I do know we have a huge unlicensed population of drivers across the state. Multiple reasons why people are unlicensed, and you know, for some of the programming that we worked on in St. Louis County, specifically the Duluth area, if there's people with let's say a felony DUI and you're unlicensed, you don't have your driver's license, but you need to get to work because you need to pay your fine so you can see your kids. So we need to get to the crux of the issue, like what's going on, why are they unlicensed? You know, what's the problem that they don't have a license in the first place? But I will get back to you on that because I don't know that data exactly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I have a question about runoff road.
Mm-hmm.
And I think driving into a ditch, but up here, is it because of deer causing that? Is it,
Yeah,
what's causing that?
Yeah, a lot of people think it's deer, or I get a lot of animal questions. Every board meeting I've been at so far, everybody thinks it's deer. But honestly, I review, the bad part of my job is I look at all fatal and serious injury crashes, so I review each of them, so I see what behaviors are occurring. And in northern Minnesota, we have a typical crash, single vehicle, left the road, impaired. That's unmelted. They're ejected because they were drunk and they were driving too far. Usually it's always a multiple. Usually people don't choose one bad behavior. They'll choose not buckle up and speed, not buckle up and speed and drink, you know, or it could be impairment via drugs. So,
And we did have one of those cases
yeah.
in our community. But that's what I just was wondering about that. My
Yeah.
second question has to do with intersections.
Mm-hmm.
When we had a local road, I loved it when there was a stoplight at County Road 7 and the old Gunplant Trail. I was one of the few that loved that stop sign or stoplight there. And I kind of wanted to see that continue because I felt it was safer as both as a pedestrian and a driver. But I was told by our county engineer of some studies that that's not true. So can you speak to that? What is it at intersections?
Yeah, I can go.
I can take that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, surprisingly, increasing control at intersections does not increase safety. We typically see more collisions and worse collisions at intersections with stoplights than we do at intersections without stoplights. Sometimes we also tend to see more collisions at intersections with the wrong type of control. And what I mean by that is if there's a very relatively small amount of traffic, sometimes not putting up a stop sign or only putting up 2 stop signs or only putting up yield signs is the right solution. And other times it's better off to put a 4-way stop instead of a stoplight. So we do look at all of those things very closely. I definitely recommend continuing to work with your highway department, and I believe LHB is working on your Fifth Avenue West project coming up, which I didn't mention. We also work with the local road improvement program in state aid, and hats off to your community and bringing those funds in from LRIP to support the upcoming Fifth Avenue West project. So I don't have the data for that intersection specifically to be able to tell you what the right solution is there. Obviously, there was more traffic when Highway 61 was detoured onto County Road 7, and I trust the folks working on that project have the right statistics and the right numbers to be able to help you make that decision for the future.
I'm sure we can all agree though, roundabouts are the best.
I agree with you.
I like them, but every time I enter a roundabout, I prep myself. Here we go. Here we go.
It's really not that hard.
Well, there's a lot going on. It's circular. It's not linear traffic. Yeah.
Just keep going around till you find another one.
I think it was Chevy Chase and
Yeah.
European Vacation. Couldn't get out of that. Yeah.
Look, it's the loo.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks for the transportation talk.
Absolutely.
Always good to see you.
Glad you could come up and be with us this morning.
And we all cheered when she came back to MnDOT, so.
Have a nice afternoon. Thank
You too. Enjoy your drive back.
Yes.
All right. Well, as we move on, we're going to be talking about our airport ordinance update, and we have John Barton here. You have quite a selection of chairs.
Wow.
The room is yours.
I'll sit right here so you can see the board if you need to. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad we're at this point now that we can present this ordinance to you. We've been working on this for quite some time. Many of you know that. Some of you probably don't. The draft copy you have says final draft on it, but it might not be because we may have a due process addition. We've had some concern about that going through and we've made many adjustments to it, but county attorney was telling me just a moment ago that we may have an addition to that that'll make it even better as far as the due process part of enforcement. So, but let me start off by just telling you what it is we've got here, why we were doing this, in case you don't know, and just run through what's actually in the ordinance. The why, I think the biggest why is county liability in case there's an incident of uncontrolled behavior out at the airport. And we're talking about airplanes and traffic and restricted areas, security, and personal public safety. And there is some exposure there that over the years that we've had an airport here, we haven't had an incident that resulted, to my knowledge, in any kind of severe personal injury. But we've had a couple of incidents, 3 that come to mind, that drove our more intense interest in doing this. There are other reasons, and I'll mention in just a moment, but they had to do with, there was an incident of hunting on the airport and a trapper putting a trap line on the airport property in the hangar area without notifying anyone. And this is where people are walking and doing their business and could step on an animal trap and not know it. We thought that was probably hazardous. The discussion between the airport manager and the person eventually resulted in removal of the traps. But it was eventual and it wasn't immediate, and so that's, there was cooperation, but there was contention, as you might imagine. Resolved, and that hasn't happened since, but it certainly could. And with the vegetation and the environment Devil Track got its name from the remarkable tracks left in the snow by a trapper. So that's an activity. The other is unauthorized aircraft activity in non-aviation parts of the airport. That's happened a couple of times and could happen in the future. We have not mentioned the person involved. We're very hopeful that we'll be able to resolve this. And this will help us do it because it gives us the actual reasons that, enforceable reasons why this person and anyone else so inclined to resist the temptation to take off or land on unauthorized parts of the airport, specifically the old airport runway down by the lake, which is not maintained. It's dangerous both to the people in that aircraft and people on the ground and so on. So we are motivated by those things. One of those incidents was relatively recent. And there are other reasons that are more general in nature. The FAA highly recommends that we have controls and minimum standards for the airport so that we meet the social standards that the country expects of public facilities. And if you read the ordinance, we've infused it with that language, and it is the purpose that we don't discriminate and make it available. We don't hinder competition and those kinds of things. They recommend that because we receive federal funds to support in large measure much of what we do, at least infrastructure-wise, at the airport. And another one is state MnDOT, our friends that were just here, Aeronautics Division, in the SASP, S-A-S-P, which is the State Airport System Plan. And one of the elements of that plan, I didn't provide that to you, and I should have. It's in draft form right now. It was presented to us at the airport's conference in Rochester 6 weeks ago or so. And they have by airport type, and the airport types are key commercial service, key general aviation, intermediate, large, small, landing strip, turf, landing strip, seaplane bases, and so on. We're a key general aviation airport. And by category, they list things that are either required by the system plan that we have as far as the infrastructure at the airport, or recommendations that they think we ought to have. And one of those things, besides the courtesy car, which we looks like we're going to have here real soon, is minimum standards. And that's what our ordinance intends to provide. So this is a hot topic. This is the first time it's been in the SAS, and they're recommending that for those airports in the state that don't have that they have it. And their concerns, I don't really know, but they are probably along the same lines that I've outlined already. Public safety and the social contract we have with people for providing services. So those are the three major reasons it makes good sense for us to do this. So what do we have in our program? We have a copy up on the screen behind me here. But let me just say that we're organized in two sections. One, what you can and can't do, the prohibitions and the penalties and so on, and then the minimum standards part in the second area. By article, we start out with a statutory authority, of course, and that's by the federal FAA aviation 14 CFR, so on and so on, and they promulgate through that bureaucratic system FAA orders, and our order is whatever it is I say in here. That recommends to us and authorizes us to set up standards for the airport. The airport compliance manual, which is part of all this pile of regulations that we deal with, has many chapters in it that deal directly with the issues that we incorporated in this. This is a way of us formally telling the aviation community that we're doing these things. For example, Chapter 8 is exclusive rights. Chapter 9, unjust discrimination between aeronautical users. Chapter 10, reasonable commercial minimum standards. Chapter 12, aeronautical lease agreements. And that's how we've generally handled this before, is in lease contracts we have with aircraft owners, hangar owners and businesses out there. Noise and access restrictions based on safety and efficiency and so on. And this is one of those several hundred page Bibles that we use to keep us out of trouble with Federal Aviation Administration, keep us from violating the standards they set for us, the grant assurances. And since we take the money, if we take money 20 years from the time we take that money going forward, we have to comply with all these assurances. And these outline some of those. What's in the ordinance then, after we have the statutory authority purpose and intent, which is to comply with all these things, language. And I must say, the review of this has been extensive. The draft has been approved by the Airport Commission, circulated many times. I don't, this is like number 7 or 8 in the draft. This very copy is now at the FAA, their compliance people are looking at this, as is State Aeronautics looking at that. And we're hoping to get there. They've had it for 6 weeks now, hoping to get some reaction from them, so that we can incorporate any changes that they might have. Plus, our county attorney, who is, you see her typing, and she's not taking notes from me, I'm sure she's working on the adjustment to our concerns here. But then we have a long list of definitions. The definitions are included in the document because aeronautical, it's the jargon of aeronautics, and if you're not a pilot, air traffic controller, you might not know what all these things are, but there they are for people to understand. We use some of those in the language later on in the document. If you have any questions about any of those, sometimes our definitions are worse than the word itself. So if you have any of those, feel free to ask me. And I've been in this business a long time, and I can make something up and confuse you further. We talk about airport management, and we wanted to put that in there so that everybody understood in the ordinance what our responsibilities are. We start off with the Airport Commission and what our responsibilities are. And we didn't make them up when we put them in here. These come from our bylaws, which were given to us by the county board. So that's your fault. If you don't like them, you know what to do. Actually, you've been very generous with us, and we have a lot of authority, and we've talked about this continuously over the years. So, if, and we're more willing to talk about these things. But you've given us a responsibility for understanding the needs of aviation in the state, nationally actually, and of course the local aviation community, and how we as a county can contribute and meet those needs. The airport manager also, his responsibility, his or hers responsibility are outlined here as well. And it's not been but a few months ago that we went through the contract with Rodney out there for the airport manager and the fixed base operator agreement. And basically the chain of command is Rodney works for us and we work for you, basically. We do have independence of action, but you have certainly review and veto power. So if you don't like something we do, just say stop and we stop. Ann is on the board, excuse me, Commissioner Sullivan is on the board, and one of her responsibilities is to keep an eye on us. And she does, besides being a wonderful editor. Article 5 is operating rules and regulations. This is where it gets into what we're telling people we would like them to do or not do. Like special events, if somebody wants to do something out there, here's how you do it. And we need to understand what it is and give them a written permit to do it so that we make sure that it doesn't interfere with the services we're supposed to be providing out there. Airside common use areas. Airside means the part of the airport where the airplanes operate, taxi, take off, maneuver, and that sort of thing. And we have 2 airsides. There is a diagram of the airport in the back. It's up by the runway where you'd imagine it, and down by the seaplane base, just a small area down there, not including the old runway, incidentally. But airside common uses, there. Vehicular traffic, we want the people to know that the general driving rules in the state of Minnesota apply at the airport. It doesn't know, we're not anticipating drag racing on the runway, that sort of thing. Park where there's designated parking, don't speed, you know, the common things. But if we don't have it in here and someone does something, at least we have reason for them to comply with our suggestion that they stop doing it. Vehicular traffic and parking, I just mentioned. And there's no person shall operate a motor vehicle and so on. There's a whole list of things there. Advertising and signs, that comes from, it comes out of the federal recommendations and the state too, but we also have a sign ordinance for the county. We in here want people to know that you have to comply with that if it's on the roadway or so on in the area that the county has already told us about signs. But we don't want postings and billboards and things hanging on people's hangers. It's a distraction, and it gets to be an unruly kind of thing where we would like that. It's not that we wouldn't permit it, but if we're gonna, I have a business out there, I have a hangar. If I want to put Sawtooth Aviation LLC on that, they would, the commission would look at the sign and make sure it's appropriate for the thing, and that's, I'm an old guy, so it probably wouldn't be, well, you never know. But that's the
Flashing
purpose.
neon lights.
That's right. So we have that included. Solicitation and advertising materials, we want to control those kinds of things out there. Pets, we haven't had a problem with pets. Generally speaking, people that have pets or control their animals, but other airports do, and occasionally you get people that feel that their pets are, not only do we, emotionally agree that pets are people too, sometimes they go beyond that and allow them the same privileges that people do have, and that's not always compatible with the operation of vehicles and other people. So. Sometimes I say too much, just unauthorized hunting. I told you about that incident already, and that's why this one is in there. We don't want those kinds of things on there. Flying model aircraft, it may not seem a problem to you, but and it's not that we're against that, but we want to know if it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and have the authorization of the airport manager so it doesn't interfere, so we can positively control that. And model aircraft are not the same thing as drones or what do I call them?
Drones is fine, but so that's already precluded, right?
We have another thing. The FAA has a Part 107, 14 CFR 107 that governs drones, and they're becoming ubiquitous now. And it used to be they weren't allowed in airport areas now, but now they're not prohibited by FAA Regulation Part 107. They are controlled in controlled area. Our airport actually is not controlled airspace. It's under our control as an airport, and we are telling, we want to know about any drone activity that's in the airport area to keep them away from the slow people intending on departing and arriving in airplanes. The traffic area is important, and we've identified that area and restricted use only with the permission of the airport manager.
Okay, so that is included in.
That is included in here,
Good.
separate from model airplanes.
That's, and I think it's the next one, right? Is that,
Pardon me?
is it item 9?
Yes, UAN, that's what I'm talking about, item 9, that's correct. And we talk about the Classy Airspace, and that contains the area right at the airport is Class G. Class E is controlled, uncontrolled airspace immediately above it, but not including the traffic airport area. So we're telling them, and that's controlled by the FAA, we're controlling about the part below that, right in the area where our aircraft are operating. So we want to put that in. We're interested in to see the FAA reaction to that. One of the reasons why we are coordinating that. All moving aircraft operations, that's targeted specifically against the unauthorized operations on areas of the airport that are not intended for aeronautical use. Disabled aircraft, we don't want people just to blow a tire and just leave it on the runway and go home, think about it, kind of thing. We want people to let us know so we can clear that sort of thing. Reporting wildlife hazards, parking and securing of aircraft. The intention there is to limit our liability. Airplanes want to fly, and the wind blows hard, and the airplane's going to fly unless it's tied down. And so we want people to take the responsibility. This takes the monkey off our back and puts it back on their back, that they tie it down and secure it given the potential for the weather conditions in the foreseeable future. It might seem silly, but it isn't. Noise impact. We don't want to be noisy neighbors, and people complain about aircraft noise frequently. We do have, I should mention, an airport zoning ordinance. It's a separate ordinance through land use people. Hasn't been revised in a long time. The last time we looked at it, when I was on the planning commission, it was more tightly worded than the recommended one from the state. There recently has been a change in the regulation that governs airport zoning, and they are asking all the jurisdictions to look at their airport zoning ordinances. And that, in conjunction with our master plan that's coming up, is a target of that. We think it's going to comply, but we want to make sure that we have good drawings and so on, so that when we designate the areas that are controlled by that ordinance are adequately addressed. But the noise part, it is part of life around an airport, and that zoning ordinance, incidentally, has been there for quite a long time. So, and this always happens around an airport, is things, new people move in, they complain about the noise. That's always been there. But just so people know that we're sensitive to the noise issue, and we want people to be careful about the noise, especially because we use conventionally left-hand traffic and we're landing to the west. That means we're over, our downwind legs are right over Devil Track Lake, and the cabin owners and stuff. That's a seaplane base too, and so you have low-flying airplanes landing there. That we want our pilots to know about noise and be aware of it, but we also want the public to know about it. So we've had two methods of that. One, this is one, but the broader one is the zoning ordinance. Unauthorized commercial activity. in order to have a business at the airport, you need a lease or a controlling document. We call them all leases, so that you can operate. We have some control over who does that. It's not intended, airport's always open for someone from somewhere else to come and land. That's the purpose of it. We're not asking everybody to have a lease that comes, they don't, from Santa Monica, they're not going to have a lease at Grand Marais Airport. But, that's accepted in here, but what we don't want is a business come here to begin commercial activities without going through the process that we outline in here, so that the county has some control over the people and the quality of the service, and get their understanding that we expect them to follow the rules. And the rules aren't just ours, but all the federal rules as well, and state rules. We have businesses out there now that this kind of material is covered in the leases for those businesses, like Sawtooth Aviation and Roy Aero Services. Right now we have service, commercial service by what's their name? Isle Royal Seaplanes. And they fly twice a day during the summer out to Isle Royal, and they're out of Houghton, Michigan. Really great people. We get a lot of business from them, a lot of economic business. Roy Aero takes care of their airplanes. They hangar one of their airplanes over the winter and my hangar out there. They're good people, but they know that we have this coming, and they will give us a written document that they understand this and will comply with it. So it's not active yet, so we are coordinating this with them now, so they're not surprised when we make it a mandatory thing. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about that. Actually, I had a question previously.
Oh,
I was
I'm
going to
sorry.
wait, but I decided I'm going to jump in on this one.
Oh, please.
Okay, so engage in any business or commercial activity. And I think, I'm pretty sure I understand the intent of this.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering about, okay, you have your hangar and you want to hire a contractor to come up and do something, and that's their business.
They're providing me a service.
Yes.
I'm controlled by this document,
Okay.
and I'm responsible for them while they're there, and that they comply with all these rules. They don't have to have a separate.
Okay.
But if they wanted to establish a business there, put up a trailer saying Joe's Construction Services or hangar rehabilitation service or something, they would need to go through this process.
Okay, and I just want to clarify, I may be too literal. When
No.
I'm reading this thinking, wait a minute, I get that.
If we've done something like that, that would be inadvertent. We'd want to clarify the language, make
Yes.
sure that we,
I just read that and,
okay.
I'm so used to returning saying, move. You can interpret that differently, so I want to make sure I was clear of what I thought it
Okay.
meant.
What else did you said something earlier, maybe?
Yeah, what was my, actually, it was about the special events, and then
Okay.
about notifying the county board if required, and I thought.
What does
My
if
first-
required?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that's my first question.
It might be something big, and if there's something big you ought to know about it, if it's just a birthday party, you might not care about a birthday party. That's what we're thinking. And so it depends,
Maybe an event like the Eagles anniversary.
yes.
Well, I was thinking about the movie thing and how that all
Yeah.
played out.
Yes.
I'm thinking, well, that
That's
would
another
be-
example.
but I
That
just
is something
wondered
that
if-
certainly would want,
If
we want.
there's a level of, yes, we can't do this until we go.
And the bigger it gets, the more likely it is to involve legal considerations that we want to coordinate through the county attorney, or that you would want to have the county attorney look at, like the movies. I mean, there were a lot of things that were involved in that one. But a birthday party or a wedding, I don't know whether you know that Rodney Roy, he's our airport manager. One of his daughters got married and they did it in a hangar out there. That kind of event we don't think would probably have to come here. You might like to know about it, but
So this might be a good time, sorry to interrupt.
sure.
This might be a good time
for commissioners to decide what types of events they would like the airport commission to notify them about. Like,
Sure.
is it a threshold of the number of people involved? Is it like the commercial nature of the event that makes it something that you'd be required to know about? Traffic is going to bring additional traffic. Because we could certainly make it more specific. It's probably a little vague.
It is.
Well, Madam Chair, I'd like to know about publicly advertised events. That would be really nice to know
Yep.
about. And then otherwise, I would be satisfied with a report, an annual report about the past events, and that would keep us in the loop. But if there's private events, I don't know that similar to the community center, I don't know every single event that when someone's renting out space at the community center, I can find out about it, but I don't need to know about that. So I don't know how better to define.
Publicly advertised.
Yeah.
events.
Publicly advertised seems
Okay,
really reasonable.
that's easy. And I can't see any reason why that.
But that just raised another question when you said that. So the community center, we have a fee structure for using county facilities
Yeah.
for private events. Is the airport commission thinking about a fee structure?
I can't say it's on the agenda, but it is in the thought process. One of our mandates is to be as self-sufficient as we possibly can. And right now, we don't have a fee structure that's published in any way. Usually, the thinking has been the activity, like the Arrowhead Eagles has a pancake breakfast
Right.
every fall. And the idea is to raise money for scholarships and other support activities they do for the airport. They do charge a fee for that, but none of that money comes to the airport directly. But all the activity at the airport, and the fuel sales and that sort of thing, is revenue for the airport. I can't say it's a lot of money, but a lot of those activities, if we charged very much of a fee, it wouldn't happen. So I don't know what else to say other than that. We would like, yes, sir.
Oh, I was just going to add, that's a great question. I had the same thought. The difference between the community center and the airport is that the community center's purpose for being is to host those kinds of events. The airport, most of the space there is leased either by Rodney or by airport or airplane owners. So its purpose is not to really host public events. So in that way, it's different. So I don't know how that factors into
Yeah,
this.
the use is, yeah.
A lot of airports have raised money, they have landing fees. No one would come here if we had a landing fee. You know, they $40, $50 to land here. They have tie-down fees, they have hangar fees. Bigger airports, I can't fly a small airplane to Minneapolis, St. Paul, not because I'm prohibited from doing that, but I can't afford to do that. I mean, the goodness gracious. And they do that, one reason is they don't want me there. You know, when I'm landing at 60 miles an hour and the 757 just right behind me is going 180 knots, 200 miles an hour, you know, there's an incompatibility of traffic, and so they try to manage that. We are always interested in the bigger, the more, as we grow, fees and self-sustainment become an issue for us, and how to do that. We all pay lease fees for our hangars. They have escalation clauses in them that the fee amounts can be raised. We use a, what do we call it? It's a community standard, what other people are paying for those kinds of things. And not for storage. If we look at what I pay for my hangar and you look at a warehouse the same and see what the difference is in the rental for that kind of space is, we don't charge that kind of fee, but for other airports and what they're charging for hangar space, for example. Although I do pay property tax on my hangar, and that's determined by the assessor and Brady fine processing of the levy that you folks determined. So most of the revenue at the airport comes either from the state or the federal government through grants and funding that way, from the space rental that we have for the hangars. For a few feet, we get a percentage of every gallon of fuel that is dispensed at the airport on a regular basis.
Clearly, a lot of this will change as the master plan is developed for the next 20 years, as we get this ordinance in. As the airport grows, then there's going to be changes in this area.
Yeah.
And the commission is very aware of that, and, you know, we'll be addressing it. And we'll periodically come back to the county board to look at those fee structures.
I'm glad you're raising it, because this fuels our conversation. If we know it's on your mind, then it's certainly going to be on our mind. It changes the priority level of the thinking sometimes. We also, pilots are a stingy bunch. You know, that's,
Because
don't
they
tell
have
me
a-
when I said that.
They have an expensive hobby, that's
They,
why.
expensive hobby, maybe that's the explanation. But it's a good point, and we are sensitive to the issue of making, and we would love it to be a profit center, and that we bank money, and then we have a funding stream, and not be so dependent on the state and the federal granting system. Most of our needs, though, are large capital needs that we will see coming out of the master plan here. But as we grow, and if there are other commercial applications at the airport, the fee structure goes along with that. So.
And I think this sets us up very well to look at those structures. I mean, if you think about expansion, if you start to think about FedEx, or, you know, we look at all the trucks that are driving into Cook County from Duluth every day. Well, maybe down the line, it's going to be more efficient to have one flight come into Cook County per day, and that will save a lot of funds and a lot of junk going into the air and a variety of things. And so that's something that in the future is something that might be under consideration. We
Right.
don't know.
And as those things change, our security requirements change, our costs go up, and that translates into easily justifiable fees for use.
Correct. Attorney Hicken, is there anything that you'd like to add to the discussion? Because you've had a chance to be really involved with this and review many different drafts that have been sent your way.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about section or Article 6, penalty for violations. This is a section that I'm currently reworking. You know, the drafters of this ordinance worked really hard to set up a structure that made sense in a practical way, and my job is to make sure that it, you know, we can follow through with the enforcement that we're promising in Article 6, and also that it's going to be constitutionally viable as far as proceedings. So how I'm reworking it is to make it a little bit like what you've seen in the tobacco ordinance, the one that you already had passed, and then recently you saw amendments made to the tobacco ordinance, which is to set up a fee structure for violation, so that somebody who's in violation of this ordinance is not, the only remedy is not going to be criminal court, like charging them with a misdemeanor or dragging them into court, but that the airport can charge an administrative penalty, like $100 for the first citation, $300 for the second one in 36 months, and, you know, more for the third violation. But not just monetary penalties, but also setting up a mechanism by which, if it's a serious violation that puts, life or property at risk, the airport can use that as a means to trespass or to deny use of the airport to the person. And so I've set up in the new draft of Article 6, I've set up a kind of a graduated penalty system that I'll ask John and Ann and the Airport Commission to review and make changes to if they want. But the other piece that's essential for due process is that somebody who gets one of those citations or gets denied use of the airport then has a chance for a fair hearing. So they get notice of the violation through a citation, and then they can request a hearing if they want to contest that citation. And I'm going to suggest that we do the same thing that's set up in the tobacco ordinance, which is that there be a impartial hearing officer appointed by the county to kind of hear that appeal. So they would have the person who was issued the citation come in, the airport manager or representative from the airport commission come in and explain the violation, and then make a decision to either sustain the violation or overturn it. And so the way it was set up in the draft that you've seen is that the airport commission would actually perform the hearing. In my opinion, they are not impartial enough. They work on a frequent basis with the airport manager. They put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into the operation of the airport. They could easily be biased towards the airport manager's side. So I just think the hearing officer way is a better way to go. It's going to require the same thing that I've recently recommended on the airport or the tobacco ordinance, which is that the county then appoints somebody, which I think a hearing officer could be a single person, maybe a retired judge or lawyer who does these on a contract basis. So the county pays them a certain fee for each hearing that they preside over. And this is expanding the conversation a little more, but I know that like the zoning department, land services, has been wanting administrative penalties for violation of the zoning ordinance for a long time, to simply issue a citation for somebody to pay a fine. We would set up the same thing for them, and that hearing officer could then hear those appeals also. So that's going to be the language that I propose, and I'm mostly through it at this point and can share it with John soon and have an amended version available for publishing if the commissioners act to set a hearing for this ordinance.
I think this is an excellent solution to this problem. We have a procedure in here already, but the way the ordinance has written now gives the authority to the Airport Commission to hear these things. There is an opportunity for appeal, but that's then comes up to you folks. And the concern is the due process and the protection of the, when we cite someone for a violation, we've already determined that they, and then we wrote the rules and so on, so it's probably not a bad idea. I endorse the idea for land services when we were over there. I was over there and the planning commission, besides the Board of Adjustment, that we long felt there was a need for something like that. So, and it would be nice if all the agencies within the county did it the same way, that had that authority. We need to be able to stop the behavior though. And so when we do this, if there is a citation, that means that they have to stop it. And then they can go through the process. That's, we're not, hopefully we're not going to be willy-nilly in this. But,
and I also want to mention that administrative penalty, the fine, does not preclude the county from proceeding with a misdemeanor prosecution. If it's a serious violation and a fine does not seem adequate, the Article 6 allows for misdemeanor prosecution in lieu of administrative penalty. You can't do both.
Yeah, chapter, paragraph 2 would be adjusted by this process that you're talking about. And misdemeanor, gross misdemeanors would essentially stay the same.
Well, I appreciate the conversation that we had this morning and look forward to, you know, the final document and at a later date, the county board will hopefully be establishing a public hearing for this. And we can look forward to a new ordinance.
And that will be after the FAA completes its review.
We will, and if we have this adjustment, we'll need to coordinate that section back to the state and the FAA. Well, one thing I didn't tell you, and if you would like to see it, we require insurance. This is the current table of insurance specifics that we would require today of people wanting to establish commercial business. We left it out of it was in there before, but at the county attorney's advice, we took it out because this might change more rapidly
Dollar
than
amounts
changing this.
change.
You
Right.
can reference it, but don't.
Right.
Correct,
And
correct.
let me just pass that around and people can take a copy of that if you would like to look at it.
Well, John, we just appreciate so much the fact that you came today, and Molly, thank you for providing us with some insight as to what a hearing officer might do for this particular situation. Any further questions or remarks?
I'm excited that you're working on this.
Yeah.
This is
Well,
long overdue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and we've got a lot in the pipeline. Thank you, Brady, for everything you're doing for us. Yeah. It looks
Thank
like
you.
it looks like we're going to get the master plan grant. So,
Yeah,
life
and the
will
state of
do this
Minnesota too, so.
Yeah.
All
Thank you.
right. Have a great day.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. All right, we're going to take a quick break till 1:45, and then we're going to bring up Rob Dieter and Sawbill Village. Oh.
Hey, Bob.
Rob?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. I was really excited to see this progressing.
Thank you kindly. Yeah,
Yes.
we are as well.
Yeah, very exciting.
A little bit of a flurry of effort right now, but
I'm sure it is. No, that's what I was reading the information that, you put out afterwards, and yeah, I can understand with the weather and all the wet ground and everything else, trying to get this thing moving. It's like the weather is there, the environment is not being cooperative.
it's been an exercise in persistence on many fronts.
They
But
often are.
yeah, but the good news is we feel like we've got most things under control, and maybe there's just one or two jump balls out there, which I'll talk about today. But just having the right countermeasures in place should handle it.
That's how it's done.
Yeah, exactly. How have you been?
Very good, thank you.
Good. It's kind of nice to see some sunlight out there and
Yep,
crisp temperatures. Could be a little bit warmer this time of year, but yeah.
I know, but yeah, it's, well, and with this whole process of, our, trying to get this first one moving so we can actually
Yeah.
get it out and going, that's great.
Well, thank you
And
so
I
much.
think the folks in Rocky and the township should be really excited.
Oh, they're excited. I had a chance to spend some time with them earlier today or earlier this week or last week, I should say, and yeah, they're looking forward to it, and it'll be kind of a change, and still hopeful and actually pretty optimistic that Bluefin will continue to move forward with theirs. So
Yeah.
that's the goal.
Glad to have you here today.
Makes harder decisions,
So excited.
makes those decisions a little harder when you don't get all the pieces that you were looking for.
Yeah.
To kick off.
Yeah, that's kind of, we're, kind of ready for those contingencies as well. So it's, I good news is, I think they, such a strong leadership and such a strong business, I think they have other levers that they can,
Yeah, they have
lots of
the,
seats.
let's just say that they have the ability to choose their projects.
yeah, that's right.
To get Jason.
Jenny, how are you?
Yeah.
Good to see you. Yeah.
See you
Maybe
again.
No,
in the
it's like a nice
future,
weekly
it would be
business.
helpful to have like timer budgets for each agenda.
I'm so excited.
Just to
about
I've done
this.
that with a lot of
Just to make
meetings
sure we stay
before.
on
Well, as you know, I was working on this so long, it's just kind of nice. Almost
Well.
a little scary that it's going, you know, it's real now.
This
It's
is a
like, all right,
on the agenda.
we're driving. So,
Every time I drive by, I think, oh, someday.
yes. Hey, David, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, should I, are we? at
Just
quorum?
jump back in.
Okay. I might have to figure out how this works, but I just wanted to kind of provide just a quick, all right, I got it. Overview update, give you an idea of next steps and just state of the state. And just kicking things off, so grateful to be here. And this has been something I've been working hard at for a long time and had a tremendous amount of support from this individual here on my left, Mary Somnus and Beth Drost, and it really is a community involvement. It's interesting because I continue to get a lot of like questions like, why are you doing this? You know, why aren't you doing more VRBO? And why aren't you building condos? And you know, you're an idiot. You're not making any money on this. And that's not what this one's about. So I think we're going to, you know, continue to keep moving forward. We're going to be transparent on what's working, what's not working, and ideally, I think we get this across the goal. And I'm really excited to have Jason here because I think just in one initial conversation with him, just the level of expertise on how to move the different facets forward will be helpful as well. And you know, ideally we take this experience, we try to figure out how to make a bigger impact. But I think you're familiar with just, you know, the project in general. You know, we will have 6 2-bedroom apartments, 1 bath on the upper floor. Each apartment is intended to come with a dedicated garage and carport, so that if, you know, there are 2 adults in that apartment, there would be enclosed and covered parking for each of them, and then additional storage in the basement units so that they you know, just usability is very important to me. That if you're living on the North Shore, you have to have space, you have to have a place to kind of put toys and store things. On the main floor, you know, still the layout is about 4 retail spaces. It's been interesting getting interest already on those spaces, so that's been encouraging to kind of see and how to put that together. And you know, so far, you know, things are kind of holding at about that $3.4 million total project cost. Still a little intimidating for me to say that because initially when we did this, it was about 1.8 to 2.2 was our range, and that's a big change. So just from a tailwind standpoint, what's going right is you've heard we did win the MHFA grant. We were one of 10 selected. There was a lot of people that put time into that, but I really do want to thank Beth Frost and recognize, you know, the support that she gave to that me in that phase. You know, Mary's support has been continuous through this, as you know, even I think some of the questions in availability of Brady through that process. Very exciting too, just to see the general support just within the township and the folks on the west end. Everyone I think is really looking forward to having that development take place. And this last bullet goes without saying, but it just increasingly more and more I am just sensitive of the challenges that housing is right now. And you know, just hearing of other either companies within the county or entities that are buying houses and how limited it is. My neighbor in Tofte, he's a nurse up here at Grand Marais, and he talked about just, you know, we're the nursing manager is living in the basement, and there's only 3 properties for sale, and there's a lot of lots, and you know, it's such a struggle that if we don't collaborate on this, we're going to have a great place to be with no infrastructure to support it. So I think, you know, the good news that I see is that there's this need. You know, the headwinds are, you know, just overall the project costs. I think the good news is the MHFA, you know, grant will go 1-for-1 against that increase. So that helps me immensely. In fact, without it, I could not have done the project. There was not a plan B for the housing portion. The 2 bad guys that have kind of crept up, one is supply chain. And this will create a little bit of a wrinkle because my intent was to break ground this summer and have the weather type shell done in October and have the apartments completed by end of December. With some of the lead times that are for supplies, we got to a level of risk that was uncomfortable, that we couldn't get to that weather type shell and that we couldn't get it completed on schedule. So we're making the call that, you know, we as long as all of our funding partners can support it, and so far MHFA can, the EDA can. We have a coordination call I'm trying to set up with IRRB just to confirm that if we're breaking ground in May, I think we're able to have it completed no later than the end of the year, but optimally sometime in the fall. So that's kind of our hedge against just how do we get all of the building materials that we need to successfully get to 100%. The other one is interesting because I feel like we're kind of coming back full circle where, you know, my need for the county in the tax abatement was to help the operating expense of running it. And through your support and the county support, we, you know, checked that block. Our focus came to the escalating building costs, which we've received a lot of support to mitigate that. And now the interest rates have pushed up where I think they'll be probably 40% or so higher than what we expected. We were thinking initially we would have about a 4.25%, maybe 4.5% rate. You know, the conventional wisdom is we'll be in the mid-6s by the time this project would break ground. So that's a bad guy that we're kind of working with, and it's just a fun kind of graphic. I feel like in normal times developing is pretty straightforward, you know, and sure it's a little effort, but you've got the right tools to do the job. This is what it feels like. And I remember being on team building exercises where, you know, there was, you know, you say, okay, who's gonna, you know, be the one that's successful to, you know, climb the grease pole and get to the prize at the top. And you'd see all these individuals that would just, you know, strong people try to, you know, jump up there and scamper up, and they had no ability to do it. But you realize that through a team approach, you get there. It's not one person that gets to that level. It's several facets of that. And each of these entities, you know, myself, Beth and Mary, the township, the county, IRRR, MHF, we've gotten there. What this interest rate does is it creates this little bit of an annoying gap. And so we're working on some countermeasures to kind of go after that. My estimate is about, it'll create about $240,000 of problem, but we have some potential options. So in terms of what's next, the big thing for me is to work through this development agreement process. And I've had several conversations with Brady on this topic, and we have some general alignment. Although it's interesting because I think I just found out last week, and maybe Bob Coffey communicated this to you as well, that both of our legal counsels work for Freiberger in Duluth. So that's easy to manage. There's just a letter of understanding that we have to recognize. So we'll get that signed and get that process going. But it will be very helpful for me if we can get the development agreement completed in June, which then allows me to complete the MHFA agreement. And then that starts a clock, essentially, because MHFA requires me to break ground within 12 months of signing that development agreement, and then complete the project within 24 months of that. So that's just that this process would be helpful maybe in the next few meetings with the county if we can work together on that. You know, we will have procurement of all of our materials, and just the lead times of a lot of these things are in the 4 to 5 month range. So I'm sleeping a little bit better at night now than I was about a month or two ago when this information was unfolding, and I was stressed about how we're going to get this done. And then, you know, kind of how I'm addressing the interest rate component is, you know, there's a couple things that we're going to try to do. Number one, we're approaching the value engineering stage of just the project itself. And so if I can lower the overall project cost by about that $250,000, then I should be able to absorb the additional interest rate payments just because we're borrowing less money as a result. So that's one option. The other option is that there was actually a federal grant that was applied for through this Main Street program and the Northland Business Association. And I don't know that that's going to be as powerful of a lever, because I just recently heard that they maybe didn't get the full range of their funding that they had expected or had hoped for. So we'll see how that is. And then the other option is that just in a combination of if I can, you know, find additional support, or I may just have to put in additional equity if there's some available. But I know that well is a little bit drier at $3.4 million than it was when the project was $2.2 million. So we're working through that. And I think the other, you know, maybe just I wish I paid a little bit closer attention in my macro and microeconomics classes, but if the interest rates going up will slow down, you know, building and investment, that might allow for some prices to come down a little bit. So if I can get a little bit in price negotiation with materials or you know, just the overall project, then that will help. So the time frame that I'm looking to achieve is if I can get the development agreement signed with Cook County on the abatement in June. That also puts me in good standing to get the agreement signed with MHFA in the second quarter of this year. The bidding for the subcontractors is a public process. So Beth and the EDA will help with that, and our intent is to utilize as many North Shore subs as we possibly can. We want to keep the money in the economy if and where we can do that. We would then break ground probably in that May, early June timeframe, depending on what kind of a winter we have next year. So hopefully it won't be as back-to-back cold and as long as this one was, but we'd break ground in kind of that mid to second quarter. And then again, same process would be, let's get the shells complete, and we'd be in a position to rent the apartments out by Q4 next year, or somewhere in that Q4, Q1 timeframe. So that would give us the 6 two-bedroom apartments ready to go. The retail spaces take a little bit longer because they're finished out just to a very general vanilla way, and so it would be up to each of those tenants to determine how they would finish and when they would finish that, but they would have some additional work to do on the back end. So that's essentially kind of what I wanted to share and prepare, and I know there may be some additional thoughts. I don't know, Brady, from your standpoint on the development agreement piece, or Jason, I know you've had some expertise on this as well. Open to questions or dialogue.
Yeah, I added to the packet was covenants that this is for lack of knowing what else to put in. We had covenants on the Lutzen housing project. That's my own experience with housing. up here, so we added those in, and those were modified, the ones that I added in. Those are for you. And then I found the original ones, so I put both of them, just as a discussion points, so that we can see where they started on the Lutz housing project, and where they ended up. And they were actually gonna, there was a proposal to loosen those covenants again, but then one roof actually said that they needed to stay with the original agreement.
And the EDA, one within the EDA
Right.
agreed that we should not
Yeah.
amend the covenants
So,
another time. There was a request to open things up a bit more for seasonal employees, and we all agreed through our meetings and conversations that we needed to stay within the intent of the agreement to begin with, which was full-time year-round,
yeah.
residents and workers.
So you have that desire for full-time year-round workers, and then you have, what does the MHFA require? You gotta stay within the, their guidelines and rules, so you don't be in conflict with that. And the third thing is you've got, is financial needs. So you've got those three things, I think, going on right now.
Yeah,
You gotta
and
put those together.
MHFA thing that Ray is referring to is fair housing standards, is that the right?
Well, fair housing, and then also the workforce housing development program, the requirements of the.
Interesting, the manager of the workforce housing program has stated herself that they're in conflict with their own, because overall they have a policy, the fair housing standard that says you can't discriminate in who you rent to for any reason, but the name of the program is workforce housing. So we understand the county's intent is to provide workforce housing, but at the same time, you have to comply with fair housing. So
Yeah, there's a way to, it's, Minnesota Housing's aware of it. There's a way to, and I was talking with you a little bit about this, Robin, on call. There's a way to sort of meet in the middle, I guess, as it were, is you can't, so federally, the only thing you can discriminate against for housing, for fair housing, is age. You can have senior living that's 55 plus and restricts it. That's the only thing that's allowed, with some very nuanced programmatic differences. That being said, you can say, well, this development, let's say Sawbill Village, is intended for long-term, full-time residents, full-time working people. What you can do, but you can, if somebody wanted to lease from you and said, hey, I want to pay the lease the price you're asking for, and they're employed in the county, you can't legally tell them no because of their employment. You can't say, well, you don't work enough or something like that. But you can say, like, restrict short-term rentals. So the leases have to be like a long-term leases over 30 days. Anything, typically in real estate, over 30 days is long-term. You could do month-to-month, you could do 6-month leases. So as long as you go over 30 days, you're doing a long-term rental. And that way, the likelihood is a lot higher that if you're renting for over 30 days, you're not going to get somebody who's just going to rent it, to come up and visit for a weekend. They're not going to pay.
How is there a way though, Jason? Because because it's living here and contributing here. That's kind of the priority. And are there ways? Are there terms and conditions that either we can bolt on to the leasing agreement that state you have to physically live here, be here, and not. I know it's like for the tax code, you have to be in Minnesota. If you want to declare like a Florida residency, you have to be in Florida like 181 days.
Yeah, over 6 districts. Yeah.
So is there some way that we can put a requirement that says you need to be in Cook County for, I don't know, I'm going to pick an arbitrary number, but 300 days or 330?
Sure, most of the year.
Yeah.
Possibly. I'd have to look into that and think about that a little bit more. I mean, there are, so you can, I should say, you can discriminate on income too, but that's not that's based on
Yeah.
that's based on a programmatic, like LIHTC, for example, tax credit process. You can say you can only rent if you're income qualified. That's something that you can use as a metric, but you're not doing that here because the Minnesota Housing, the program itself says that it's a workforce market rate housing, and actually they favor. It's like the only program ever in housing that favors market rate applications over mixed income or more affordable applications, because they're trying to hit rural Minnesota market rate challenges, which is exactly what this is. So I'd have to look at whether or not you can say if there's a requirement to be basically a Minnesota resident, that lives in this place for X amount of.
Compliant with Minnesota.
And we need it stronger than Minnesota, because I don't, it will be a failure if this is rented out to well-to-do retirees, right? And they say, okay, sure, I'm happy to pay rent and have a place on the North Shore for
Right.
18 grand a year, and that's not the intent.
Yeah, it's a good question for Sarah Bunn to say, is there an issue with doing this that would Minnesota have, because I mean, they're the ones, so the restrictions start with all the funders, of course, and the county from reading the abatement policy doesn't have any explicit thing that restricts that, at least for this project. So then the question is, what is Minnesota Housing or IRRR is also contributing? I don't know, I've read their agreement, but I presume that they don't have a specific.
They don't.
Yeah, so then it's Sarah Bunn and asking her, is there a
Okay.
conflict here with us doing this? I'm sure she's got questions like that before in the Rainier Lakes area or other communities, similar challenge.
Oh, great.
I sent her those covenants,
Mm-hmm.
their first revised covenants there. And I never got a response, but she's had them in front of her for a month.
Hmm.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask is, are they legal? If-
Well,
If, it's.
within their rules.
For their, so we were able to use those covenants with one roof because MHFA did not participate in that
Right.
project. They didn't have any funds in that project.
Mm.
So those covenants are legal because they were reviewed by one of those attorneys before they put them in the lease agreements. So as far as basically legal, yes.
For that, yeah.
Within parameters of MHFA, that's the question.
That's the
that
question.
needs to be answered.
Yeah.
It sounds like a working session or an ongoing working relationship with Jason and Rob and Brady, if you're the county person on this, is that correct? And I don't know.
I'm going to link to Bob Tosby, who's actually doing the agreements.
Oh, it's Bob, okay. Oh, great.
I was assigned the agreements.
Excellent.
I'm happy to call Sarah too and try to follow up and say, hey, Brady Powers told me you have the agreement, can we talk about some of the covenants language? I don't want to if you're going to already do that, I don't want to step into that conversation.
Yeah, no, I would come in and work with us, Jason, and I would, let's include Beth on that, just because I know the relationship between MHFA and EDA.
Yep.
So I think if you and I, Beth and Brady stay aligned on the communication with MHFA, we need to figure out what's the strongest language we can legally use that connect the rental of those apartments to people who are living in Cook County and then ideally working in Cook County.
Yeah, that's not one I have run into yet. It's kind of a unique further North Shore challenge. We didn't really run into the residency thing.
So the covenants, just quickly, the original covenant required that at least one person in every one of the apartments in Newton once a year had to provide a copy of a pay stub that proved that they were a full-time year-round working person in Cook County.
How did that prove they were year-round, though?
Well, it would be a pay that showed like their gross, like this is their weekly pay and this is the year to date, so it would show that they've been getting paychecks over
So
the
you can
course
do
of
the
the
math
year.
and figure out how much to be okay.
It was for the rental management company to figure out the legitimacy of that, well, not the EDA, so I don't know.
I don't blame you. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
But, the amendment was, that Brady's referring to, the amendment to the covenant was if the rental management company had advertised the apartments for rent and no full-time year-round employees came forward to rent, then the management company could rent the apartments to businesses who could then house their
Yeah, I read
seasonal
that.
international workers to ensure that the rent was always being collected, that the occupancy was full, that the debt service could be paid, that the project didn't go into the red. So that was why we made that amendment. And the recent discussion that we had was, we had a request to renew that arrangement for like a 5-year rental term, so that the employer would know that they would have those apartments ongoing. And we said no, because every year when the lease comes up, the rental management company has to again advertise to full-time year-round people. And again, one roof and the rental manager can do it in that case because Minnesota Housing Finance
Was not
provide
involved.
any funding.
Yeah.
So those examples, I'm pretty sure Sarah's going to say that isn't going to be the right thing for them, but it's a place to start. So can you, Bernie, make sure that you send those covenants to Jason?
Oh, I have them, yeah.
You have them
Robin
already?
sent them, yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep,
All
I've
right.
got them.
Very good. So on your slide that you have the team that's standing next to the greased pole, you can add the HRA to
Yeah.
team.
Jason gets
Maybe
a.
Jason's that
Can I
top
put a
gap
I
part.
don't want to be on the bottom, that looks
So
like.
that's what the grease is at the top.
Is that the top?
So it's,
That's kind of, yes, true.
wherever
I need to be. Doesn't matter. Wherever I need to be.
It's painful no matter what.
Standing
Yeah,
on the
that's right.
shoulders of the rest of us.
Yeah, right, coming at the last minute.
So I have a question about the time frame, the very first one, in terms of develop an agreement with Cook County in June. What does that mean for us?
It means he needs us to be able to reach agreement on that wording and pass it in the month of June.
Yeah.
Not just discuss.
Right.
By the end of
Right.
June?
Today is discussion,
Right.
next time is showtime.
That's correct. I think what Brady and I have kind of talked about from if we can make this work, would be to have a chance to bring it up at next week's board meeting in May. And then I think there's another board meeting on June 14th, and that was the goal that we had hoped to bring that to fruition. You know, and I think the 2 steps before next, or what will be going on this week, is we'll sign our letter of agreement that our 2 attorneys can work on, represent each of us. And then my intent is to take the boilerplate that Bob Tofty creates. We'll have a chance to kind of work through that and then get to language that we would feel comfortable bringing to you. And then have a review period and go from there.
So I have a question from the county perspective, I guess. It's strange because I'm of the county, but not in the county. I don't know how to go. Anyway, so you're going to work with Freiberg or whoever your representation is there to draft the original, or is Bob Tofty drafting the original document?
I think Bob's, my understanding is kind of got he's got the head start on putting it together.
Okay.
And I'm comfortable with using that as the starting point.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Bob finishes that whenever the ETA for that document is, and I'm in the weeds here just because I've done enough of these to know that these can get prolonged, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with timing and the reality of what happens. So if Bob gets you the document holy cow, it's the 17th, soon-ish, you have time to look it over with your counsel.
Mm-hmm.
Who from the county, Brady, are you representing the county negotiating those finer details of the development agreement? Because it's likely that there'll be a red line version coming back to you to look at and review. Who's doing that for the county, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tofty will be our attorney on that. But I would think if he's asking us on attorney language to make comments, I would want Molly to look at that.
Yeah, so that's the question is the city or county attorney going to be because typically it's the attorneys are representing the county, and then there's the entity like of St. Louis County, or gosh, I still got to move mentally for the right time. Sorry, I live in Lake County, worked in St. Louis, and now I'm in Cook County. Okay, one of the counties. I'm just thinking of streamlining the process to make sure that roles are understood, because when it comes back from your attorney, there's going to be some If I'm wrong, I will eat my words. I've never seen a non-red line development agreement. Presumably, there will be some marks in it. And so then we just need to know who's going to be making the decisions from the county's perspective on what's acceptable and not acceptable on those changes to be able to turn around that quickly and get it back to Rob.
Yeah. If it's legal language that isn't policy related, I would think the top is going to do that. But if it turns out if it's policy, then it's going to have to,
It's here, yeah.
Then you have to
It's
bring-
here, but I mean, we're going to be bringing, so we may be making some interim, we will be making some interim decisions, what to present to the board.
Right.
As much as we can.
Right.
Yeah, and if you really get hung up on something and you need to send it out to us, you know, it's one of those that we just have to recognize that if you have questions or things that if you need something, you know, we just got to do that legal. We got to be able to find a way to be able to do that.
And I don't know, from where I'm sitting, it seems like Sarah Bunn might be the answer we need first on what can be put into the document.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but- right. So, again, sorry, I'm not trying to go deep in the weeds. I agree. I think it'd be really, making sure that the document doesn't conflict with any of the Minnesota housing requirements is super important, of course. But the development agreement is also an exchange of what the county is getting in exchange for helping this project. So outlining things like indemnification and things like performance bonds, all the, and I don't know what the boilerplate for the county is. I haven't looked at it. I'm just presuming that they're going to be, so there is legal language, yes, but there's still there's flexibility within the legal language. Like, are we going to require this, or is that not necessary? And then there's, of course, there's the policy things, like, well, we don't have a policy for this, but what do we want to do for this specific project? Because then there's precedent. I'm just getting at, it can become a pretty sticky wicket quickly, and some seemingly really small things, your attorney, even though it's going to be Freiberger, your attorney might be saying, like, don't let Bob Toffey get away with that. That's a terrible idea. Because he's representing you, and he should do that. So I just wanted to make sure that there's an idea of how we're going to because June is fast, and that means we have to have it done by the 7th of June, put on the agenda for the 14th, which means you have about 4 weeks, less than 4 weeks.
Yes.
That's correct.
That's all.
Commissioner Hawkins, you had a question.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was concerned about a few months ago. That this development agreement was going to get written in Brady's office by Brady. And at the time, I kind of wanted to have a committee set up. We need to think about the county's perspective. I get, you got to deal with them I always get them backwards. To make sure you get their money. I'm looking out for the county's money. And I think we're on the same page of making sure it's workforce housing.
Yeah.
But I am not comfortable agreeing to a document that doesn't lay that out.
Yeah.
Because from the beginning, we've said the tax abatement was for workforce housing. Now, we have to figure out a way to make that final document something I can vote for.
Good.
And I don't want it to just happen with Brady alone. So I
Just to
think
put
we
that
should
in,
talk about it.
yeah, just to put that in perspective, it was always going to end up in Toffey's office, but we were waiting to find out whether he was going to get the grant, whether this was going to go forward. Bob didn't want to get into the whole
Right.
fee
Right.
and have to charge until we found out whether that was going to happen or not.
Do you have a draft from Bob?
No. He's actually looking to see what happens here today too, as to whether to put in to even leave those revised covenants in there.
Do you think he's done this before?
Uh,
Do you know? I mean, I know Bob has a
I don't know if he's
100-year
done
career
anything
history. He's probably
specific.
done it all.
I know his office, or that
They have.
firm
Okay.
has.
Yeah.
So,
I used one from Sherburne County as the model,
okay.
and then he asked if he could change it to another model that's been used in their office,
Okay.
because it's all formatted correctly, and
Alright.
it's easier for me to work with. And I said, yes. Because I think he said all the boilerplates are very similar. I said, yes. He
Just-
said, we haven't really discussed those boilerplates.
Knowing that Jason has done this before,
A few times.
connect them
Yes.
and let let us be as helpful as we can to this very fast ticking clock.
And yeah, to be clear, I'm not at all in any way trying to insert myself in the process that's been established. I just, as you know, there's an open invitation if I can be helpful. I want to be, because I know what you're trying to achieve, and I also know that we're trying to protect the county's interests, and that's the balancing act we try to, walk, and the line we try to walk. I don't know, I mean, I've worked with Bob before on bond issuance questions, so I know him more from that world, but there are plenty of people at Freiburg who have done real estate documents. I'm not worried about that at all. It's Commissioner Hawkins, your earlier question is it's pretty irregular actually for the elected body to work on a document like that. It's typically staff that works on it, brings it, and then you can make change suggestions or requests to see something else in it. Just because, document drafting by committee is awful, complicated. Yeah, it'd be June 23 when I get it done by that time. So, but to your point, yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that we have an ironed out way forward for Rob, so that we don't run into, an email chain of who's doing what, who's on first.
Sounds like Sarah and Jason and Rob and Bob are the,
And Beth.
And but that, and thank you for not trying to insert yourself, but I think you really need to be inserted, so.
Everybody else wants to insert you.
Yes, I think that's very appropriate.
Well, I think that the important part there is with your experience, we're gonna need all that help we can get to not run down those paths that aren't gonna provide us with what we need. I mean, we really wanna stay on the main path and just keep moving ahead. And if you've seen things that, would distract you from that, just raise your hand and say, no, don't do that, stay here. We can get to that, but put it on the side.
And that's a good comment, Bob. It's what I took away in my first conversation with Jason, because just even what terminology to use, and how is that terminology going to be amiable to what MHFA needs to have in a document, but also within that is, welcomed by the county's intent and what we want to accomplish. So, yeah.
But we may run into legal hurdles that we just may not be able to achieve. I appreciate all best effort to get the right words, because I'm in the same boat with the others. That was our intent. Now we have to see how can we get this as robust as we can get there. But still stay within the legal framework, because we don't want to move this forward and then have it come back that says, now you really can't do that.
It might be helpful to send a draft to Sarah Bunn too when there's, significant agreement or alignment, so that she can say, oh, it's fine, or not.
And she may be, because I think she made mention of 10, and there was like another series of projects that she was working on, and there's a lot of coordination, I think, to get those agreements out. So I don't know where mine fits on the pecking order. So I know she's kind of under the pressure, of getting all that work done. So I can, maybe share and see if she'll respond to myself or Beth, knowing that we're one of the 10. I think just maybe on that note, and I've shared this with Brady, I wouldn't be here if I was not committed to seeing this as workforce housing. And if I have to walk back language, I like workforce, I like year-round, and I like long-term. So somewhere in that kind of hierarchy is how I'm prioritizing. The things that I worry about, and I think if we all look back just in the last 20 years, and I'm using 20 years because that's the window of the abatement, and just how things have changed economically for our country and our community within those 20 years. I mean, there's significant variation in defined periods of time. And recognizing that just, the margins of this, and we're probably building it at one of the highest points in the last 20 years. Our interest rates are going back up to be, at least at midpoint of, of highest in the 20 years, and certainly higher than what they've been in the last 5. I mean, it's kind of the worst time to be able to do that. And what I want to be able to do is have the flexibility to respond to how things might move. So we stay in the black, And, you know, I'm trying to thread this needle of operating expense and, you know, there's other challenges I'm trying to manage within the county because solar is baked into the project and the utilities being passed down to the tenants so that they're not having to pay for electric. And so, you know, there's, I think, facets to this that I'm also trying to manage. Because I heard, this is on top of mind, because I just heard Arrowhead only allows maybe 2/3 of what I intended to build from a solar standpoint.
Oh.
So I got to meet with them to figure out, hey, is there a way we can stretch the kilowatts and generate that? But I want to, so I want to share that because I'll be approaching the development agreement on how do I stay true to the intent, which is workforce. How do I balance that with just the ability to pivot if some of these macroeconomic forces conspire, and you know, just balance that change, I guess, as it comes.
Well, that's why I brought this up. I think it's important for expectations, so that you know what we
Right.
need to work with,
Mhm.
we know what you need to work with, and then come together hopefully by the time frame that you have.
Perfect.
Well, and I really believe we have shared intent and shared values around this table, and you have a team of people that support what you're doing. And so use that team, and let's hope that we are coming back in the very near future
Yes.
to do some further work together.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I appreciate it, and feel the same. So I'll be in touch with you guys very soon.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day. All right. County vehicle utilization.
So I have a modest proposal. We have been sitting in this room for almost 4 hours, and it is lunchtime, and this is an informational item. It is not anything super pressing. I would suggest we defer this to next week's board agenda, where I can present this information, and that way I can also get the spreadsheet information posted to iCompass so that folks can see it in advance.
I think that's very appropriate. Very appropriate. All right. We have minutes of a couple standing committees, personnel and our building committee that have been attached. And is there a motion to adjourn?
We're just going to do that.
All
No,
right.
I'm just gonna up and leave.
All right. We'll see some of you in a few minutes.
Indeed.
Another meeting. Thank you.